In 1998, Father Ted did something most sitcoms wouldn't dare try. It built an entire episode around one of its own priests being branded a racist, and somehow it turned it into one of the funniest half hours the show ever made. Nearly 30 years later, that same episode ended up back in the headlines, though this time it wasn't for the jokes, it was for a warning label slapped in front of it. The episode is called Are You Right There, Father Ted? And it starts with a bit of bad luck. Mrs. Doyle falls off the roof and does her back in, which means she can't do any housework, so Ted and Dougal end up covering for her.
Please square bit of black dirt on a window. I would have thought that was practically impossible.
It's just Mrs. Doyle can't do any cleaning. Her back is very bad since she fell off the roof.
Right then, let's go! Let's clean this mother! Yeah!
Left to their own devices with nothing to do, Ted and Dougal get bored most instantly. So naturally, Ted decides this is the moment for an impression, which, if you've seen even one episode of this show, you know that is a terrible idea. He grabs a lampshade, puts it on his head and starts doing what he thinks is a completely harmless bit of fun. Unfortunately, right outside the window is a family who've just moved to the island, watching the entire thing. By the next morning, word's already made its way around the island. Ted steps outside and bumps into his neighbour Colm.
I hear you're a racist now, Father!
Before Ted can even respond, an older neighbour barges into the conversation, except she thinks Ted's having a go at the Greeks, not the family is actually offended. By the time Ted's trying to duck into a pub for cover, he's being chased down a street by a furious crowd, and the pub turns out to be full of exactly the people he's trying to avoid. Even Mrs. Doyle gets in on it.
Father Crilly, I hear you're a racist.
Dougal jumps in to defend him. Ted just about manages to insist again that he's absolutely not a racist. Then we get to the scene everyone actually remembers. Ted invites the family round to apologise properly.
This big mark is still on the window. Never mind.
And while he's rehearsing what to say, he spots them through the window and starts waving, explaining himself, really going for it with arm gestures. What he doesn't realise, there's a small square mark on the glass sitting right under his nose, and from where the family's standing, it lines up perfectly. With things now completely out of hand, Dougal's big idea to fix everything is a celebration of Craggy Island's ethnic diversity. A party, complete with a slideshow meant to prove once and for all that Ted isn't a racist. Ted throws it together with the confidence of a man who has clearly done zero research. The slides include the Great Wall of China, Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, presented as a proud example of Chinese culture despite being Japanese, fictional, and not actually from either country. At one point, a completely unexplained photo of a Maori man appears, and Ted has no idea how it got there. He wraps it all up by calling his guests
A great bunch of lads.
The slideshow itself is rubbish, but they're happy to take a free drink. Meanwhile, something else has been quietly unfolding underneath all of this. Right at the start of the episode, before any of the lampshade business, Ted put round to a fellow priest's house to pick up a borrowed book. Father Fitzpatrick insisted on giving him a full tour of his rather one-sided World War II memorabilia collection, swastikas the lot, and introduced him to an elderly house guest who turned out to be an actual former Nazi. Ted, doing his best impression of polite interest, just nodding along for as long as he could stand it before making his excuses and getting out of there. At the time, it was just a deeply awkward visit, nothing whatsoever to do with Ted's problem. Except it turns out to matter a great deal. Within days, unknown to Ted, Fitzpatrick and his house guest are both dead.
Wait, these aren't Valium. These are the cyanide we kept for emergencies.
Having mixed up their medication with cyanide pills. Fitzpatrick's entire collection, the genuine article, not a costume or a joke, gets mailed straight to Father Ted's house. Ted is actually expecting a delivery around this time, but a completely different one. Materials to redecorate the house. Mrs. Doyle, having no idea what's actually arrived, cheerfully unpacks the Nazi collection and puts the whole lot up as decoration. So that same evening, when Ted brings the Chinese family back for a nightcap after the party, They end up sitting in a room now dressed head to toe in real Nazi memorabilia.
I can explain everything.
And it doesn't stop there. The next day, in one last desperate bid to make amends, Ted sends a year's supply of whiskey round to the family as a further apology. Father Jack gets to it first, drinks the entire delivery, and ends up moments later climbing out of a box wearing an actual Nazi uniform. So, while Ted's out there panicking about a lampshade and a Hitler-shaped smudge on the window, he's already met the real thing in person, twice. And still somehow ends up the one everyone's convinced is a racist. This episode was never really about Ted, it's about everyone around him. The neighbour who suddenly discovers strong opinions the moment there's a rumour to hide behind, and doesn't even care which group she's angry at, as long as she's angry at someone. An actual former Nazi living on the island for years, while one accidental hand gesture gets all the outrage. Ted's the only person who's actually horrified by the idea of being a racist. Now fast forward to 2025, Channel 4 streaming service quietly adds a warning to the episode, noting it was made in 1998 and contains language and racial impersonations some viewers might find offensive. And that's when things got interesting. Graham Linehan, who co-wrote the show, was having none of it. His argument was that Channel 4 had taken an anti-racist episode and, by slapping a warning on it, basically labelled it racist. Stripped down, his point was simple. This episode was written to make racists look ridiculous, and warning people about it completely missed the joke. Online, reaction was mixed, but leaned pretty firmly one way. A lot of long-time fans felt the warning missed the point entirely, and some pointed out this wasn't even a one-off. Other shows like Only Fools and Horses got the exact same treatment around the same time. A fair few people just found the whole thing funny in its own right. An episode about people wildly overreacting to something small got a warning added because people were worried other people might overreact to it. Craggy Island logic straight into 2025. However you land on the debate, there's something very Father Ted about all of this. A show built entirely on tiny misunderstandings spiralling out of control ended up causing one of its own. Nearly 30 years later, Ted would have hated the attention. Dougal probably wouldn't understand what everyone's so worked up about, and Mrs. Doyle would just be relieved everyone has finally sat down long enough for a cup of tea.